Good morning. I see we have quite a few schools on here from all over the country, so thank you for being here. My name is Caleb Spittler. I'm one of the territory sales managers here, so I spend most of my time visiting schools and listening into the needs of different school districts.
And I'm Aaron Lewandowski. I'm a design and marketing specialist for American Time. I work with engineering and product development, and I develop content for people such as yourselves that are interested in solving a problem and need some information on products that they're researching. So, and also online today with us is Scott DeSmith. He's a product application specialist, and he's got over 30 years of experience in the industry. So he'll be joining us today. And if you have any questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to use that chat window there. Type your questions in, and he'll get to them as he can. So with that, I think we're set. Caleb, do you wanna start us off here?
Yeah, excellent. So let's talk a little bit about some of the pain points that we usually hear when we're talking with school districts. Now, American Time has been a leading clock provider since 1980 and has worked with over half of the school districts in the United States. So we have a lot of experience in talking with different districts and different schools as to what things are giving them problems. So as you can see, I have the largest one up there as the cost. I think just about every school district I talk to will bring up something having to do with cost. That's always a factor and a very real thing that people have to consider when they're looking at what clock system to go with. And a lot of people are worried that a wireless system is going to be much more costly than a wired system. So that's one of the things that we want to cover today on how a wireless system can actually, in some circumstances, save your district money. The next thing I have up there, you see I have simplicity. So we're going to talk about how a wireless system can be in some ways more simple than a wired system. Again, some of it depends on your situation, but everybody's looking for a simple system. No one wants to be thinking about their clocks more than they need to. They just want to install their clocks and have it work. And that's what we want for our customers as well. Flexibility is up there. I'd say 9 times out of 10 when I'm talking with someone, there's a spot that they want a clock that they don't have wiring in that spot. So we're going to talk about how wireless will give you that flexibility to put clocks where they best fit your needs. And lastly, effectiveness. I was sitting with a superintendent just several weeks ago and was telling me that their building is the oldest building we've ever worked with, and it's a castle. It was built in the dark ages. There'll be no way that we'll be able to get wireless signal in his building. Well, that's something that we were going to talk about today, is how wireless technology actually works and why it's so effective in so many schools. So Aaron, what types of clocks are typically found in schools today that you see?
So yeah, I know we want to focus on wireless today, but I just want to really quickly go over some of those different types of clocks that are found in schools. So I like to group them this way, kind of by how they receive their time. There's some different ways to group them, but I find this is easiest because sometimes you have a cord hanging out of a back of a clock, and you might say that it's a wired clock, whereas it could be wireless, and we'll kind of go through that later on in the presentation. But with standalone, you're going to have a battery quartz clock. It's a clock that you'd typically find in a store. It's going to have a set dial on the back. You set the time, and then it's just going to free run. A step up from that is a calendared quartz clock, and that's going to be similar to a quartz, but it's going to have a microchip located inside the movement, and it's going to record what date it is. And for those daylight saving time changes, it's going to either hold the hands back or move them forward to adjust that 1 hour during those times. And then the last one there is radio controlled, and this can be a simple and economical way for synchronized time, but I kind of caution on that because it is very dependent on that radio signal from Fort Collins, Colorado. So if you were in the area of a country on the East Coast, or even if you have some kind of physical barrier between the clock and that radio signal. You won't, if you don't get coverage, those clocks won't correct. They won't adjust for daylight saving time, and even interference plays a part in if they're going to get that signal. So interference even from a computer monitor can affect that signal. So sometimes you'd install those within several feet from a monitor. So that's going to also be one thing that can affect that signal. And then the next two, master controlled, are really pretty similar. One is simply going to be controlled by a direct wired connection, a 3-wire connection. So it's going to receive time correction that way. And then the other one is wireless, which we'll be talking about today, and that's going to receive time corrections wirelessly or with a radio signal. And then lastly, those IP network clocks, we've got Wi-Fi and PoE. Those are very similar to one another. PoE is going to be directly connected to your local area network via Ethernet cable, and Wi-Fi through a wireless access point located within your facility. And then the last one, Bluetooth, that's a little bit different. It's a wireless technology, but it's going to be where the clocks are talking to one another. It's really a device-to-device technology. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But those are some of the clocks that you might find in your school. And we can move on to why we think that synchronized time is important for schools. Synchronized time, I like to think of it as accuracy of time. So if you can send that signal and that time out to one clock, you can synchronize any number of clocks within the facility, and it gives the school kind of an official time. So the time on your clocks are going to be similar to other devices in your school, or down to the second with other devices in your school. So if it connects to your network, it's going to have the same time as computers in a computer lab, or even people that are on a cell phone. Those times are going to be very similar, or if not exactly the same. So the clocks on the synchronized network will be plus or minus a second from when they're getting their signal from the master or those other wireless devices. So it allows you to keep and maintain or even change schedules within your school. For instance, if there's a late start because of a weather incident, and then it also, synchronized time also gives you kind of a sense of security, because it coordinates where students are at any given time, and if you see them in hallways, you can kind of approach them and see where they need to go. So it's also kind of a security measure as well. So let's get into wireless technology. The first one here I have is what we refer to as wireless, or some people call it radio frequency wireless. It's going to be a broader frequency. It's going to reach out to a larger area. So this can be master controlled. Any clocks that are on the network are going to receive time correction, usually a couple different times during the day. And with these systems, you can also use the time to turn on other switches. Any switches that can be controlled. An open switch, or normally open switch, can be controlled by the master. So your clocks, and say there's a lighting area that you want to turn on or off at different times. Also, an audio device or a bell can be controlled by the master and will be on time with your clocks. And in some cases, if you have a wired circuit, that can also be controlled by the master. So really, some of these can be a hybrid device that can control both types of systems, either wired or wireless. The next one is Wi-Fi. This is really pretty straightforward. If you have a good Wi-Fi signal across your facility, these clocks will reach out a couple of times during the day and connect and get that timestamp and correct as needed. And then the third one is Bluetooth. So this one is really, like I mentioned before, is kind of a device-to-device technology. So you're going to have an initial device, sometimes called a bridge, which is going to receive the timestamp and then communicate that time to the clock next to it, or maybe there's a couple clocks that are within close range, and then that initial clock is going to talk to the next clock in line, and so on and so forth. And it kind of creates what's sometimes referred to as a mesh network. Where do these masters, or in this case, a Bluetooth or Wi-Fi device, where do they get a signal? Really, there's only a couple different ways that they reach out and get that signal, either through an Ethernet option or GPS option. So Ethernet is going to connect to your local area network, and which will be connected to network time protocol servers, a couple of different places in the country. And satellites as well are going to receive that same time from NIST and atomic clocks in Colorado or other places in the world to get the correct time and broadcast that to your network.
So if I can just jump in for a sec, the Ethernet option is by far the most popular that we see. Most people are putting their master in. Really, for an install would just be a 3-prong plug-in and then the Ethernet data drop. But in some circumstances, people want to avoid the network altogether. So that master can pull from the GPS. That's where the master gets its time. And then with the radio frequency, we'll tell all the other clocks what time it is.
Yeah, so you really have that option of keeping the clocks on a different system with GPS. So now we want to talk about really the wireless transmission between these 3 different types of wireless technology. The first one is really transmitter dependent. So that 200-foot range is kind of where you start off. I'd say that's a 5-watt transmitter. It's going to cover a smaller school, and that can go all the way up to 10, 25, 40 watts. So it's going to cover a broad range of devices. When you get up to those higher level transmitters, they'll have an external antenna, and they can cover areas as wide as several blocks or even further. So that's a really broad range and gives you some flexibility as to which type of transmitter you decide to go with. The next one is Wi-Fi, and really there's some different types of Wi-Fi, but I want to focus on the 2.4 gigahertz band. That's typically used in clock technology, and that's going to give you, indoors about 150-foot range, maybe more, especially if you have a more open building. But you all are probably real familiar with Wi-Fi in your homes and different devices, so that's going to run on a similar kind of frequency. And then Bluetooth, and we're talking about class 2 Bluetooth. I know there's class 1, 2, and 3, but this class is used in clocks, and that's going to give you a 35 to 50-foot range. So it's talking to the next clock, to the next room. So if you need to make that connection, just keep in mind that range.
All right, so now we're going to look at your specific building. There's typically 3 factors that will play into how your building actually receives its signal. So obviously the overall square footage of your building, meaning the length and width, the depth and the height, so how tall your building is, and also if it goes into the basement, and then lastly the materials that you're building that actually make up your building. So really big idea here. 2 points that I want to get across. First is not all wireless technology is the same. So at the kind of premium level, if I can say it that way, in terms of wireless technology and clock providers, we see a very high level of success when it comes to wireless signal throughout the facilities. Now, all the different options that Aaron mentioned in terms of the different wireless technologies, really all those options can be good solutions for even these 3 different building makeups that you see here. But like I'm saying with that, not all wireless technology is the same, even when it comes down to who the actual manufacturer is. So, if I can say it this way, make sure that you have a warranty. When you're going to go ahead with a wireless provider, make sure that A, if it doesn't work, you're not stuck in a situation that you don't want to be. And B, make sure that if you have some reservations about whether or not you'll get signal in your building, then you should be able to talk to your clock provider about trying out a field test unit. So you can always say, or you should be able to say with your clock provider, can I actually test out the signal in my building before going ahead with that type of investment? Now, I do want to mention here new installs versus updating your existing school. I saw in the poll there that about 80% of the people logged on to this webinar are currently using wired clock system. Now, some clock providers will actually have a hybrid clock that can run your current wired clock system. So the same exact clocks that you're using, utilizing that same exact infrastructure, they can run that clock system, and then whether it be as clocks are failing, or if you add a new wing, or there's an expansion or a renovation, you can also add wireless clocks to that system. So it can run both at the same time. It's one of the things that we like to talk to people about. If they already have that wired system, then you obviously want to utilize that infrastructure as you make the transition to wireless. Now, if you're just doing a completely new install, this is where wireless can really save you quite a bit of money. I believe the labor and the cost of running those wires and buying those materials is $300 per site, per location, I should say, of each individual clock. So $300 times each clock that you're wanting to put up for a wired system, and that's on the construction of that facility, is going to go towards that wire system. Where if you have wireless, obviously you'll only need the price of the master and the clock. Now, really another thing that I wanted to mention is that your clock provider should be able to recommend to you what size of transmitter you need, or if you're doing boosters and repeaters, what you need there. Um, you know, they shouldn't expect you to be a clock expert. They should be able to recommend what size you need. So uh, we're just showing you a little bit how we can actually take measurements. You can see a facility there that we can measure the square footage on, and that's a quick way that even without coming out to your site, we can get the overall measurements of your facility and recommend what size transmitter will be best for you.
Yeah, and those transmitters, the larger ones, you can receive, you can get a shared license with too. So if they do require a license from the FCC, you can get a shared license and kind of take care of that part of it. Next, I want to talk about system installation and the different types of wireless technology out there. So really, once you get that master, or if it's a bridge set up, it's gonna take you through some install programming procedures where you're gonna enter like your time zone, your IP network settings, time server address information. So once you get that first device set up, it's going to automatically receive that correct time. And then as far as your clocks are concerned, your wireless clocks, once you turn them on, they're going to reach out and grab that signal, especially on first startup of power. They're going to go out and receive that signal and automatically adjust. The analog ones might take a revolution, or they might actually go past the correct time once and receive their time. Digital clocks are going to jump on that correct time right away.
If you're installing a wireless system and you have nothing to wire in, no wired bells or anything, that's something that you can do in-house without having to bring in a contractor or an electrician. Most often, if people are doing a wireless system, they'll run their clocks wirelessly, but then they'll want to wire in their bells. So in that situation, you would need a low voltage electrician to come in and wire in those bells for you. Or if you have someone on staff that is licensed, they can do that as well.
Yeah, and the one thing I also want to mention about installing the clocks is you want to have them in the location they're going to be, because once they start up, they're gonna look for that signal, and if they're not finding it for whatever reason, you can tell that they might not be on the network. So don't install or power them up in a work area. You want to kind of have the clocks where they're going to be installed. So just to make sure that you're getting that signal. As far as maintenance goes on these wireless systems, really there's very little maintenance, especially compared to some of the wired systems and some of the legacy clocks that are out there that have mechanical movements. These are going to have solid state movements. So the clocks themselves, they're going to have different battery life expectancy, but most of them are going to have multiple batteries, so they'll have a life expectancy of 3, 4, 5 years, depending upon where they are and what technology they're using. And as far as the master goes, any maintenance with that, I see as scheduling updates. So if you're setting bell schedules or class change schedules, or like say you're going to program an event, fire drill, you might have that or see that as some maintenance that you might set up at the beginning of the year or as the year goes on.
Okay, so I told you that we would talk about cost and how a wireless system can actually uh, save you money. So let's talk about 4 different ways that a wireless system can actually save people money. The first one is actually per clock. So a lot of people don't realize that as technology of these wired systems uh, becomes more and more obsolete, and less manufacturers are actually making those older wired clocks, that price continues to climb. So, for example, say you have impulse clocks right now, you could be spending over $200 per clock, and we see this pretty often. But even if you don't have an impulse system, per clock, oftentimes for those mechanical clocks, is going to be more expensive than a wireless system a wireless clock. So you can save money per clock there. Really on the maintenance side of things, there's a lot of labor hours. If any of you have replaced a movement on a mechanical clock, you know what it's like to have to take the crystal off, take the hands off, pull the motor off, put a new movement on, all that. Whereas with a wireless clock, you're really not going to have that. The maintenance that people do with wireless systems is very minimal, honestly. That's one of the reasons why wireless systems are so popular, because it eliminates most of those labor hours. Um, so again, I mentioned this already, but not having to run wire for new installations, whether that's a renovation or an add-on to an existing building, or if you're building a completely new school, not having to put in wiring on the front end, not having to put in that infrastructure, saves schools thousands and thousands of dollars, easily will pay for the system. And lastly, again, I touched on this already, but what some schools do is they actually have a migration to wireless over time. So I'll give you an example. One director of facilities I was talking to, he actually knew that they were planning on moving to a wireless system in 2 to 3 years. So he said, "Yep, we're moving to a wireless system in a couple of years." But right now, he was buying brand new wired clocks that he knew he was going to throw away in a couple of years when they went to a wireless system, because he just had to maintain and replace clocks as they failed. So one solution for someone in that type of situation is, why not put in the wireless master, especially again if it's one of those hybrids that can run your existing wired clocks, and then every time a clock fails, you can replace it then with a wireless clock. That way you're not paying for a brand new wired clock only to throw it away in a couple of years when your school finally has the budget to move over to a wireless system. So there's 4 ways that you can actually save quite a bit of cost on your wireless system. Just as we're getting to the end of this PowerPoint here, obviously look is actually really important for schools. When you walk in to a school district, you want to have a nice look. So it's definitely something to consider when you're choosing your clocks. Is okay, what style do I want to have? Obviously, you can see there the black plastic, the aluminum, the steel, the wood. Also, most providers will have digital options as well, and for some providers, they actually print their logos there in house. So ask your clock provider about custom logos. This is becoming more and more popular with school districts, that they'll put the logo of their school on the face of the clock, and that can totally change the look of the school. So, really, just in summary, the bottom line when it comes to wireless systems is that they're simple to install and maintain. They give you that flexibility in that you can put a clock wherever you want. They're highly effective in terms of the signal throughout the building. Again, I can't speak for all wireless providers. You want to make sure that you have a premium clock provider, someone that's been in the business for many years and has a good reputation, and B, please get a warranty. Make sure that you're not one of those schools that is going with a wireless system, putting in that investment, and then you don't have a warranty in place that it is at least 2 years or higher in case those systems do begin to fail. You want to make sure that you're covered. And really all these factors is why wireless systems have become by far the most popular solution for schools as they're updating their clock and bell system. Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. We are going to take a few questions here. Before we do that, just to say, if you want to reach out to either Aaron or myself, feel free to do that by email, or if you want to call me, I have my direct number on there. We'll also be sending you some follow-up information of some further information on these wireless systems and some action that you can take there in terms of how to actually move forward if you want to see more with those systems. All right, the first question we have is wondering how good the wireless will be inside of the school building. So this is one that we get, like I said, really often. A lot of times, I think what kind of causes people to ask this question is if they're not getting very good cell phone strength. A lot of times people think, well, you can't get wireless signal in here. We can't even get cell phone in here. Well, a cell phone signal is actually a different technology than that radio frequency. Most people are shocked at how strong of signal wireless technology can get throughout your facility. We've seen facilities that are 8 stories high and 4 stories deep into the basement get wireless signal. We've seen some of the thickest buildings really that I've ever seen get wireless signal. So it's incredibly effective, again, if you go with a provider who is trusted in the industry. All right, next question. Will it sync with an in-house NTP server? Aaron, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, and I guess I'd say really all of these wireless technologies will sync with your NTP server. They're all going to be connected to your Ethernet, so really they're all going to broadcast that signal either through direct connection to your local area network or a wireless network.
Excellent. Okay, so here's a question I get all the time is, should I go with Wi-Fi clocks or a wireless clock system? So a couple factors that go with that. The first and the biggest factor is if you're looking at Wi-Fi clocks, most Wi-Fi clocks are not going to be able to run a bell system as well. So when you're buying that wireless master clock, typically people are running both their clocks and their bells off of that master. Whereas if you're looking at Wi-Fi clocks, those will just be your clocks. The second thing to keep in mind is typically Wi-Fi clocks per clock are more expensive than wireless clocks. So there's a crossover point. If you're looking at maybe 20 to 30 clocks, then maybe Wi-Fi is a good option for you. If you're looking at, say, 40 to 100 clocks, then you're definitely going to be saving cost going with a wireless system. That master will pay for itself once you start buying those clocks. So typically, it can be anywhere between $30 to $40 more for an individual Wi-Fi clock. So that's really only going to be cost effective in smaller volumes. But it is they're both effective solutions. So if you have another reason that you feel you want to go with Wi-Fi clocks at a higher volume, maybe you have a few buildings that are really spread out or something like that, both of them are going to be good solutions. We typically recommend for smaller volume, and if you don't need to run bells, Wi-Fi is a great solution. For larger volume, and if you are wanting to run bells as well, wireless is the most common solution there. And I believe that is going to conclude our webinar. Aaron, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we end here?
No, just I saw one question come up, I think in the chat, and it's our school district has different types of clocks or that are different ages or even manufacturers, different brands. How would a district manage those different types of systems? Some of the masters do take a correction, or they can be programmed to correct different manufacturers' clocks, so those wired clocks. So they can run a wireless system or that wired system that may be of a different manufacturer. So with that different time protocol for those wired clocks, they will send corrections to those as well. And then through that master, when you go onto an online portal, you'll be able to see all those different clocks and manage it online remotely. So that's one way to kind of control. If you're within a district, you can control if they have different masters or different schedules, different clocks, various clocks. So
just to add with that, one of the things that's really common that I see when I'm visiting districts is when a new school is built, of course, they put it out to bid. Whoever comes in at the lowest price will bring in their clock system with them. And then a lot of times districts will continue that model, which can end up to, I've seen 8, 9, 10 different clock systems throughout the district. So one of the things that we're always recommending to school districts is if you can actually standardize on one clock provider, that's going to make it easier for everyone to schedule bells throughout the district. You'll probably get better volume discounts through going with one provider. A lot of times people think, well, we want to have competition. That's what's going to get us to a lower price point. Actually, a lot of times providers these days are giving out the best discounts for people that are willing to standardize with them. And obviously, if you have someone new that comes in, we get so many calls of someone who comes into a new position and says, hey, I got 8 different clock systems. I don't know how to run these. So anything that you can do to standardize your clocks across your district is going to save you time and money in the long run. So that is all that we have for you today. Thank you for joining us. Of course, we'd love to have you next time as we talk about our EverAlert platform. Again, if you have any questions or you want to begin looking into more information or even moving forward with a wireless system, you can feel free to reach out to Aaron or myself. Our contact information is there on the screen. We will also send you some follow-up information with steps that you can take to move forward. Thanks again and take care.
Thank you.